a lot of people seem intent on dying on this hill. This idea that Elden Ring outperformed The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, a game that sold at a higher price point, that continues to be relevant on Nintendo Switch 2, that is still chopping charts. The entire meme that, like, Elden Ring outperformed Tears of the Kingdom essentially amounts to, like, fanboys who just refuse to support any kind of Nintendo hardware, just clinging on to, like, the newest, like, fad, just kind of like Skyrim before it. This is going to end the same way, where, like, Elden Ring just tapers off into irrelevancy and no one talks about it again. We're already well into that, like, that formula. We're already seeing this played out, but, like, it is really interesting to see, like, just how adamant, Fromsoftware fans are about Elden Ring outperforming Zelda. How delusional they are about, like, sales numbers, and about, how popular the game is, how, the quality of the game, all of that. Zelda just clears everything. They try so hard to shill Elden Ring, and they try so hard to pretend that FromSlop is Nintendo's superior. They're not even their equal. To pretend that FromSlop is, like, the best in the industry, and at the same time, they refuse to acknowledge that Duskbloods, the upcoming From Software game, is a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. Now, the cope right now is that, like, this isn't going to be, like, an exclusive forever, but, like, look at Bayonetta 2, look at, like, I don't know, so many of these other, like, high profile third party exclusives. Like, that's never going to get ported over. Okay, it's not going to happen. Like, Nintendo's working on the game with FromSlop. This is, like, a co-development project, and Duskbloods is going to stay on Switch 2. There will be no PC version, there will be no Xbox version, and there will be no PlayStation version. This is, like, a Nintendo Switch exclusive. So, with that being said, looking at, like, what's going on with this, uh, what can we expect from this? What are we going to see? Well, like, first of all, we do need to acknowledge the obvious, that, like, from Slop, the first thing they did after Elden Ring came out was immediately, like, take the knee to Nintendo, like, Nintendo-sama, please, my sword is yours. You know how, like, how, like, a Song of Ice and Fire, where, like, Daenerys, whoever, like, subjugates some kingdom, and, like, people, like, pledge fealty to her. That's basically what happened to FromSlop, is that they knew that they would not be able to compete with Nintendo, and so they immediately decided that they have to be on Nintendo's next piece of hardware. That was the first thing they did after Elden Ring came out, was they ensured that the game would launch on Nintendo Switch, and they put into production, like, a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. So, like, FromSlop knows better than anyone else just how tenuous their position is. They know just how sick of the general population, of the Souls formula, the general population is. They know the fad isn't going to last. They know it's entirely based off of, like, hype, and just, like, game journos, like, lying to people, and YouTubers, like, soy jacking over, like, I don't know, like, lore implications. Like, it's all entirely fake. It's all entirely just not building up to anything. Because anyone who, like, critically analyzes, like, Elden Ring, anybody who does that will tell you that Elden Ring is just a rehash of Demon Souls. Like, with reused assets, reused mechanics. It's not even all that, like, well put together. Like, Elden Ring is just a derivative, uninspired knockoff of a game we've been getting since 2008, right? It is the Call of Duty of action RPGs. It really is that bad. And people don't want to acknowledge it at all. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about how people are getting sick of the Souls formula, and they want to, like, worship FromSlop. They really want to push, like, FromSlop as this, like, titan of the industry, and yet, curiously enough, these same people who are hyping up FromSlop right now, who are hyping up Elden Ring right now, don't seem all that enthusiastic about their next major project. There is like a lot of coping in the community about Duskbloods, about the exclusivity, about the quality, about like what's going into it, but like the reality of the situation is that Elden Ring is coming to Switch 2, and we're getting a new From Software exclusive on top of that. This should be considered a major L on part of like PlayStation, Xbox, and PC fans. If Elden Ring really was that big of a deal, if FromSlop really was this titan of the industry, FromSlop like siding with Nintendo and supporting their hardware should be like a major sign that Nintendo Switch 2 is like going to be the market leader, and that like that we need to go out and buy Switch 2s right now. But instead, no. Like everyone sat there, they bitched, they moaned, they complained, they made up excuses. Nobody was excited for Duskbloods at all, and that, I think, really showcases the core problem with FromSlop, with Skyrim, with like whatever else, like BioShock, Dead Space, Mass Effect, any one of these like bargain bin, like just completely broken woke RPGs we've gotten in the past 20 years. This has been like a reoccurring thing with them. Like these games are not good at all, but because they're not on Nintendo, game journos like are able to use them as like a bludgeon to try and like downplay Nintendo hardware. You see Review Tech USA doing this all the time. Well, like Nintendo Switch doesn't have all these third-party games, so that means it must be inferior. But like the reality is, like something like Mario Kart World by itself is worth more than like the entire PS5 library, including like the back catalog from older consoles. Like it's crazy just how much more mileage you'll get out of like Mario Kart World or Donkey Kong Bonanza or like what have you, compared to like Dark Souls. I've seen people brag about like I've put 1,000 hours into Dark Souls. Like I know people who have put that much time into more time than that into Splatoon 3. I know people who like did the same thing for Splatoon 2. Like again, there's this very curious like inability from the gaming community to like acknowledge just how much better Nintendo is when it comes to like the games they release, their hardware, and their partnerships. Because you don't see a single person speculating that Duskbloods could possibly, potentially be better than Elden Ring. The entire cope right out of the get-go was that like, well, first of all, that this is going to get ported to the real gaming platforms, but second of all, like it's just a budget Nintendo game that nobody cares about. Like they say this while they're hyping up Elden Ring Night Rain, the complete and abject failure that nobody remembers or talks about. Like it's just it's kind of remarkable, seeing like Elden Ring Night Rain versus Duskbloods, and see like the community like bend over backwards trying to defend Night Rain and everything that game is doing, while like trying to like pretend that like Duskbloods doesn't exist. It's a very conspicuous thing. It's kind of makes you think about what the mindset of the average FromSlop fan is, and I do think we do need to call this out. Going into this as Nintendo fans, Duskbloods will be complete garbage. Just like Elden Ring, just like Sekiro, just like Bloodborne, just like Dark Souls 3, just like Dark Souls 2, just like Dark Souls 1, just like Demon Souls. Duskbloods is going to be the same derivative, uninspired rehash slop that we've always gotten. It doesn't matter that it's multiplayer. It doesn't matter that the game plays completely differently or has like pre-made character sets. This game is going to get mocked by all of the far superior RPGs on Nintendo consoles. I'm talking Trails. I'm talking Yeast. I'm talking Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm talking like, Mario and Luigi Brother shit. The best RPG to come out this generation. Like FromSlop can't compete with all that. Like they are getting completely destroyed. And I think this release is going to be a major turning point for a lot of people because this is a Nintendo exclusive, you are not going to be seeing the same kind of defense force, the same kind of hype cycle that you saw with Elden Ring. And I think that is a very interesting phenomenon, something that we absolutely need to call out for what it is.